Today is Victory in Europe Day.
Just as I have a dream.
A salute from Mr. Nelson Mandela.
And Mrs. Thatcher.
Hello and welcome to Systems Reimagined. My name is Benji and I'm joined by my two great co-hosts, Samuel and Rachel. And today we're just going to be breaking down a little bit of a kind of lighter episode, shall we say, talking about some of the COVID developments in the UK with regards to vaccine rollout and cases and deaths, sadly, and also just other developments with regards to kind of Scotland and things along those lines, and potentially some stuff on the EU. Then we're going to move on to the US to discuss the GameStop fiasco, which just went down, which I personally found quite funny, I won't lie. And then finally, we're going to basically review some of Joe Biden's first executive orders in his first week, essentially. So yeah, I guess I'll start it off then with the UK vaccine rollout and essentially daily figures. So I actually want to give credit to the government here because I think this is a new thing, but they've laid out the data for COVID every day in a really nice and graphical way. So it actually makes it really easy for people to kind of see where we're going. And in this case, actually gives them hope because it really looks like we're on a decline, especially with regards to people who've tested positive with COVID. So that's good because, obviously it mirrors the idea that, the vaccine is, the pandemic is shrinking with the R rate now being in between 0.7 and 1.1. So we had 16,840 positive cases today, which is much less than what we saw, I think it must have been 2 weeks ago now, where it was almost 70,000 in one day. So that's really good. We've seen a slight decrease in our deaths. We have pretty high death rate. We had 1,449 deaths today. We have a decrease in the amount of patients admitted to hospitals. So it was 2,642 today. And with regards to vaccines, we've now administered, I believe, around 10 million vaccines. So that's kind of insane in the vaccine rollout. The idea that we've almost vaccinated I think around 15% or just under 50% of the UK population is really something we should all be celebrating because it's quite incredible. And I'll pass it off to you guys now, but just in terms of it's a nice contrast, I guess, to see the vaccination program being rolled out under the NHS, how much more efficient it was than what we saw with the test and trace, for example, which was outsourced to Serco. So that's just I think quite a good case study, I feel with regards to how we could approach the health services more generally with regards to efficiency and things, and I guess debunk some of the myths which I see peddled around, which is so many of these government funded institutions are just so inefficient and all these things, so that's just my thoughts on the matter. I'll leave it at that. So if you guys want to add or anything.
I do think it's good news that the general deaths and cases are going down right now, and also obviously, as we mentioned last week, the vaccine rollout has been very efficient and has worked well. And as you said, it does show that it does make the case for a public and also localized way of vaccinating people and making sure that it's just shown that's been a bit more efficient than the other projects that we've outsourced. And it does dispel a myth that as you said, the public can be a bit more inefficient, compared to the private.
You mean efficient?
Efficient, yeah, sorry. Compared to the private sector. That's pretty good. Another interesting point to raise, I think, there's also been discussion, I guess, from labor side especially, about potentially, the ban in travel. And I see that is it true that they implemented, they want to do a hotel quarantine system?
Yeah.
Which I also think is a positive development. I think it should have been done maybe a lot sooner, but it is positive that, that the government is being a bit more, efficient and trying to think more outside the box that they did in the first outbreak. So it is, yeah. There's finally some positive developments all around in the UK. So yeah, I think that's all good. Yeah.
Maybe the government was listening to our podcast about comparing COVID responses and decided to pick some things up from it.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. Just in terms of the private sector, though, obviously, I think it needs addressing that there is quite a difference between the test and trace system and the vaccination system in terms of the urgency. Although test and trace, like it does save lives, it's a lot less direct, and the vaccination, I think whether it was public or private, would have been successful. But I agree that it's clearly been incredibly successful, a lot more than anyone would have thought in terms of those targets being reached. 10 million people is obviously a really, really strong statistic to have got to kind of by the end of the first full month. Going kind of on from that, in terms of the vaccinations in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, Nicola Sturgeon has tonight come out and said that she's hoping for primary school children to be back in school kind of within about 2 weeks' time, which is a lot faster on the track than England are expecting. They've kind of given March 7th as a rough ballpark figure for teachers to be prepared, but those targets still need to be continued to be reached for children in England to go back kind of next month, but it certainly won't be the end of this month. The government have been clear, so I think that's quite interesting in terms of the UK as a whole are all kind of obviously vaccinating to a strong level, but the different approaches with those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it could have to do with the fact that, well, at least in Scotland, they locked down earlier than England did, right? And also, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, when she announced that lockdown, she also made clear that she felt that they were a couple weeks behind where England was with regards to the progress of this new variant and things like that. So that, I mean, I would assume that has to do with it. So I mean, I guess it also lines up with like the UK, not the UK, England coming back a bit later with regards to school opening and stuff like that. But yeah, positive news though. I mean, I mean, just myself, I've been quite a massive critic of the government, and so it's quite nice actually to see, like, you know, some of these steps just finally getting employed, right, to combat the virus and things. But one thing I do actually quickly want to note was about the quarantining in the hotels. Like, I definitely welcome it, and I think it's a good idea. But I think that I think in order to like it for it to really like have you know, a maximum impact, it has to be combined with like other COVID measures, I feel like. So in Australia, for example, it's not like they're isolating people in hotels and then, you know, just not locking down when they had like a couple of cases in a city, for example. Like, they did both of those things, right?
Yeah.
To help it get under control. So although like it is definitely a good thing, I feel like they really have a great impact. It should, you know, essentially combine it with other measures, essentially, to really maximize that effect.
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-pronged approach to deal with this crisis. And I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure, but was it the case that only countries that are in the red like zone, like, which is considered very high risk, are they the only ones who quarantine in the hotels, or was it also anyone who travels here?
I think it was only in the red zone.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was.
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, I think. I mean, in my eyes, I think it should be everyone in general just should quarantine, at least. I mean, until they get their tests, especially maybe for the lower risk countries. And yeah, that combined with, you know, I mean, I don't think we should be encouraging flights in the first place. I think, I mean, I find it hard to like think what exactly, if you, besides returning back home to the UK from another country, like, why else would you be traveling? Like, a lot of, like, you know, like white collar jobs could be done, like most of it can be done via like online, you know, with Skype and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm wondering why. I would wonder why people would need to travel here. But and regardless, I think you know, just trying to limit flights in general, hotel quarantine, or just quarantine as state made quarantine. That could be effective. And then, yeah, as you said, just locking down, like being very proactive in how we lock down. Even when there's very few cases, just lock down once again. And you can see that all the like successful cases like Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, they were very like proactive. And even when it was just like, even in the single digits, like they locked down right away and just squashed it as soon as it could grow even further. So yeah, as you said, just to echo, it's just a quarantine is only one aspect and needs to be it's a multi-layered approach, and yeah, and I think the government is slowly coming to the realization of that, and I mean, not much to complain about this week.
Yeah, and I'll go to you in a second, Rachel. But especially like with now the government, it seems like they've had some renewed fears, I guess is the right word, with regards to the spread of this South African variant of the virus. So if they really want to keep that under control and stuff, it is a wise idea. They're to have, I guess, these kind of localized approaches to these things, and just combining it with the hotel quarantine, etc. So yeah, I'll pass to you, Rachel. Now that's the last thing I want to say on it.
I think just to agree really with you in terms of what you're saying, Benji, Scotland obviously able to start reopening schools those few weeks earlier than England are because they were quicker to lock down in the first place. So again, it kind of highlights that taking that decisive action quicker is going to enable the opening up and these returns to normality in the long run. Also, just in terms of what you were saying with this new South African variant, they've now seen kind of similar codes with the Kent variant, which we saw in December, which apparently there's some kind of skepticism about now in terms of whether the vaccinations are able to cover a South African Kent variant. But I think
dual combo.
yeah,
it's the randomest combination.
Yeah,
the African Kent.
But so there's some concern. I think the government were quite keen to downplay that and say that the vaccine will still be effective. But certainly, if it is effective, then it's the kind of double vaccination process rather than just this single dose that a lot of people have been given. The only kind of caveat, although we're all like very kind of happy obviously this week in terms of that 10 million being reached with the vaccination, if you then look at how many of those 10 million have had the second dose of the vaccine, like it's absolutely minute in comparison. I don't have the exact figure.
It's 500,000.
Yes, yeah. So like a fraction of the overall amount. And that is the only way that kind of SAGE and these leading scientists have said people will be immune kind of long term is to have that second dose. So hopefully that's something that happens quickly. But in the meantime, just that first vaccination is certainly effective.
Also, I'm not really sure why the reason for this is, but like when you have only one vaccination of the virus, you're more susceptible to getting, one dose of the vaccination, you're more susceptible to getting a mutation in the virus. So that could be what we're seeing with this Kent South African strain. But that may just be speculation. But I know that is true though, that you have more potential for mutations. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, nothing else to add really on that. I hope that this the second dose comes soon. But I saw some things with the I guess with the EU. I mean, it was the WHO actually who said that the UK should slow down their vaccination program to help the distribution of vaccines globally. Which, to be fair, I mean like I'm really happy about the vaccination program and stuff, but I understand like the effort. I mean, what the WHO is saying, like obviously, we've spoken about this on the podcast as well. There's obviously a huge discrepancy as to which countries are getting these vaccines and which countries are not. And so a lot of countries, as in the global south, as we've gone over, are struggling to get these vaccines, or they don't have the infrastructure and need the support, and they're just, not really getting that. So I wonder how that dynamic's going to play out, because I don't know if the government's too keen really to slow down, because it is a good achievement, and like if we're being completely honest here, like one of the few good things that they've actually done in this whole pandemic. So I mean, and I'm not also trying to downplay it. Like obviously, it's amazing that we have all the people vaccinated, but it is just a fact that they haven't done a lot of things good.
No, yeah. I do think regarding the distribution globally, I think what the WHO is saying, I mean, it makes sense morally and also in a globalized world. If you want to combat the virus once and for all, you need everywhere to be vaccinated to a large extent. So even in the say if the UK just vaccinated ourselves, like if there's other countries that are lacking in vaccines, then that could create a whole new problem in the UK. So it does make sense, but I just don't see, from like the point of view, like the image point of view of the leader, like it would look very stupid to them, I think, especially when it comes to elections, electorally speaking, to give up vaccines to countries that are halfway across the world. It doesn't look good. I mean, unfortunately, yeah, I just the optics are not good for any leader to do that. So I'm very skeptical that they'll eventually do it. I think they're gonna try to get everyone in the UK vaccinated as quickly as possible. But I do think the main way of providing more access to these vaccines is to take the patents off, and that allows other countries to produce it and distribute it within their own population. Because I think that's the main driver of the lack of access. So I think that should be the main focus. And also, yeah, I mean, sure, I guess we can try like pressure the global north countries that have been able to deploy vaccines very quickly, put some pressure on them to try distribute it more evenly. But I don't think that will happen. So I think patents is one of the routes to do that.
Before I go to you, Rachel, I just want to say that in terms of patents, some of them are open patents. I think like the Moderna one is open patent, but for the ones which actually could really help some of the global South countries, we've spoken. I believe it was Rachel who spoke about this in the previous podcast about how that a really big issue is storing the vaccine at these cold temperatures, right? So with something like the Pfizer vaccine, which needs to be stored at like -70 or something like that degrees, right? Trying to develop the infrastructure to accompany that is much harder than if we had something like the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, which only needs to be stored in like -2 degrees or something, which is much easier to cater for. And a lot of these global South countries already have the infrastructure to, store vaccines at those temperatures, right? So I don't know if the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is open source patent, but I don't think it is. But I will have to check on that. But I'm not of the impression that it is. But yeah, if something like that or some more of the high the vaccines you could resist degradation at higher temperatures were kind of open source, that'd be much more useful. Would be very useful for these global South countries.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree there. Really, I think I'm not 100% sure myself, but yeah, certainly in terms of kind of the demographics and things of other countries, it's going to be so much easier, as you said, just for storage and things like that. I think it's difficult because, like, if we're being blunt about it as well, it's kind of, would you rather save the lives of your own citizens or like citizens abroad in terms of the like helping a worldwide kind of distribution effort? And at the moment, the UK government are just completely focused on the UK population getting vaccinated. And I think realistically, as much as they should kind of play their part globally and help out with the World Health Organization and other such agendas and things, they do have to, just as you were saying, Samuel, in terms of like votes and elections and things, put that in the forefront, which, I mean, we don't need to tell them to do. I think they're certainly like doing that of their own accord, but you would hope that with time, as more and more people get vaccinated and these targets hopefully do continue to be met, that they play more of a global role as well.
Yeah, I will also say, like, I will say though, I think that dynamic though of like the UK being more of a global role in this vaccine distribution and stuff could have been achieved if it didn't have such a bad response. Like in New Zealand, for example, we see that within their own region they are distributing some of their vaccine supply to kind of surrounding countries. But then again, New Zealand and Australia, for example, they have had a very limited death toll, right? Yeah. And so I understand, like, from the conservatives' perspective, right? Like, they've had a bad death toll, a really bad death toll of over 100,000 now, and now to try win sympathy, try like get the sympathy of the public to allow you to distribute the vaccines to other countries is like virtually, I mean, it would be impossible, right? So I do think they could have played that role, but just the way that they handled the pandemic has essentially limited that option.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to come on with the kind of advertisements just while we're on COVID?
Oh yeah, I mean sure. I mean yeah, just for in terms of advertisements, like there have been these. I think we mentioned it in our interview with Charisse, but there was these advertisements been going around, and I can show them on screen now. And it's the idea here. I mean, at least my take on it would be, it's the government. It's so first of all, as you can see, it's like a photo of some people with oxygen mask on essentially, and it's saying, oh yeah, like tell them that you bent the rules. I think that's what the wording is. I'm not really seeing it directly now, but I believe that's the wording. And so this whole like idea here, in my view, is just kind of shifting the blame of a lot of these hospitalizations, a lot of these deaths onto the public, which obviously I don't really think is. Obviously, there was like there is like some public blame, I guess. But in reality, though, if you had a really strong government response, the percentage of the public which would be breaking these laws would be obviously reduced. Like if you had a lockdown where something that you saw in France, for example, I believe, where you had like roadblocks. Or in Spain as well, they have the same thing. Like obviously, less people are going to be risking the rules because they're going to get punished for it, right? So like I think the messaging turns people against one another, and I think that's also mirrored in just some YouGov polls that I've seen of recently, which is said. It did one poll saying, oh, how serious are you taking this lockdown compared to the first, and then another poll saying, how do you perceive other people are taking this lockdown compared to what they did in the first lockdown? And for the personal responses, I think it was 84% of people said, oh, I'm taking it more seriously than the first. But then the perception of other people, the responses were around 80% thought that people were taking it less seriously than the first time. So, I mean, the messaging obviously seems to be effective in that case. So yeah, I mean that's all. I mean, I really have to say on it. I do think it just really is distasteful and like not really representative of how government action could really have reduced this death toll overall, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, not much else to add from what you said. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not saying that everyone should stay home and stick to the rules. Obviously, that goes without saying. But yeah, I do think it's been a consistent theme throughout this whole pandemic. Shifting the blame and trying to cover up their own government failures. And yeah, I think throughout the whole thing, it's been quite effective because I think throughout every day on the news you see like, especially in the first round, like you see like those photos of people just on the like everyone on in the park, and they're just like trying to give the sense like no one is following rules at all. And yeah, just I mean, as you said, like the public perception is that it seems like despite people being more strict in this lockdown, people perceive that people are less strict. So as you said, there's a gulf, and it seemed like that marketing aspect to deflect the handling of this crisis seems to be working. So yeah, I mean, not much else to add.
Yeah, I do think distasteful is the word. Like they've really kind of plowed some money in. I've seen that advertisement on like Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. They're really kind of peddling those social media apps that are most kind of frequented by young people, and I think really kind of trying to scapegoat younger people for this increase, and quite effectively too. Some studies I've seen, like there's such a generational divide between like who is causing this kind of third wave and things like that, and it is seen as like these kind of raves and like weddings and things, and there are exceptions and there are people hosting these events which are obviously huge kind of COVID circulators, but ultimately, as you've both kind of alluded to there, it's keeping open offices where people could be working from home. It's kind of not having such strict enforcement on public transport, but that's the only way that people can go and buy their groceries or can go and get to their vaccination appointments. because they don't necessarily have that disposable income to take a taxi or to drive somewhere. So I agree. I think they are quite distasteful. And to be honest, I think as shocking as they are, I think people have just they've been met with quite a lot of anger. Like, it's holding people personally responsible for things that like anyone is really quite keen to avoid, apart from that really small exception.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. It like genuinely such a small percentage of people. And yeah, I think what you're saying as well there with like office spaces and stuff, again, also is crucial. As you spoke about last week, Rachel, about the lack of financial support with regards to furlough and job safety and things like that this time around, as opposed to the first time, even though that this, wave of the pandemic was even worse than the first wave, right? Like, this whole, it's good messaging because it's kind of all encompassing in a sense, with regards to like avoiding, government responsibility. But yeah, just like, yeah, very distasteful. And, just with like more generally as well, I feel like we see this when you get like media representation of kind of lower income families and stuff. Like the fraction of the tiny fraction of people breaking COVID, just like the tiny fraction of people who are like really manipulating benefits, for example, is not representative at all of the whole, right? Yeah. And so just again, like, it's interesting how like different, like how media sources and different advertisement stuff can really manipulate a narrative, right? And kind of get a certain perception in people's heads. And so yeah, that's I guess my final comments on the poster situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Should we move on to?
Oh, or do you have anything else to add, Rachel?
I think I was just saying the same in terms of like summary of a bit more UK news before we kind of go internationally.
Yeah, exactly. Should we move on to Biden?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can do that.
Okay, I'll lead it off. So yeah, Biden, he's been in office for nearly 2 weeks, and we just wanted to go over some of the executive orders that he's passed since coming in office. And yeah, some of them we'll go into more detail, some just because they're pretty obvious, so some we just go over now. So the first one I wanted to talk about was the proclamation ending ban on U.S. entry from Muslim majority countries. So, this was, I think, 2 years ago where Trump declared a Muslim ban for certain countries entering the U.S. And obviously it goes without saying this is a very bigoted and Islamophobic policy that Trump implemented, and even going on his logic was very inconsistent because arguably the biggest exporter of terrorism, which is Saudi Arabia, wasn't included on the list. And obviously that was for political reasons that they weren't included. So I think obviously it's a good thing that Biden ended that Muslim ban from the US. And yeah, I think it was a pretty straightforward one which was expected of him, Another three that I want to quickly go over was the executive order for pausing federal student loan payments. I think that was a good one, especially now during these times during COVID. I think it's hard to expect that for students to pay back their loans. And there's been talks over what he wants to, of perhaps like, writing off $10,000 worth of loans for every student in America. But I do think that, obviously it's better than nothing, but in my eyes, I think they should have more ambition and go further. And I think it also makes economic sense to do so. But yeah, at least for now, it's good that he's pausing student loan payments. And then an executive order reversing transgender military ban, which I just think, as with the Muslim ban, there's no this one has no logic behind it. It's just a bigoted and transphobic law to kind of pander to the culture war base of his part of the party and of who support him, So yeah, that was great that they reversed that. And lastly, executive order to end reliance on private prisons. And I think that's good, obviously, that to stop giving out contract for private prisons, because it is a big issue. Obviously, I think that won't solve the prison issues in America, because it goes beyond just private prisons. But it's a good start, I think, in that sense. And hopefully they go further as the years progress in his presidency. But it also doesn't address, immigration facilities. Yeah. So I think that was also a point that he missed out on, and perhaps hopefully moving forward that they address. And also end private immigration centers and everything involving ICE. Yeah, I mean, then some that I'll go into more detail. So the first one that I wanted to go into was executive order rejoining the Paris Agreement on climate change. Obviously, this is a good thing because having an international program where people can address and collectively fight to improve climate change is a necessity. Obviously, in my eyes, it doesn't go near too far enough to address climate change, and it hasn't been properly stuck to by most countries. But still, I think the idea of having countries come together to fight this is necessary, and it is an overall good move to rejoin. I just wanted to point towards a tweet that Ted Cruz made, which was hilarious. He said, by rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, President Biden indicates he's more interested in the views of the citizens of Paris than in the jobs of the citizens of Pittsburgh. This agreement will do little to affect the climate and will harm the livelihoods of Americans. I mean, I don't know what he's saying about the citizens of Paris. I don't know if he was making a joke there or was he being serious.
I think he's serious. Ted Cruz is like genuinely, I think, pretty dumb. Like, I mean, this whole tweet is just, it's like so, I mean, it's just stupid. Like, obviously climate change like affects everyone.
and obviously, yeah, but they also have to make sure that if there is a ultimate transition to a more green economy, there needs to be, we have to be sure to message that there will be a easy way to facilitate a job transition for people who work in more environmentally damaging industries. So it's to make sure that to kind of get rid of that talking point on the side of the Democrats. They have to come up with a real plan for transition. So yeah, that was a good executive order. Another one is executive order revising immigration enforcement policies. This includes policies like the separation of families at the border. And while this is good, it is a bit of a symbolic move. I mean, the Biden administration rescinded the zero policy memo that Trump set up that ultimately led to family separations. So that he's going to work to find this, I think it was 600 families who were victim of the zero tolerance policy and reunite them. But it was said, I mean, there was a lot of family separation way before that policy as well, which they have not addressed yet in the executive orders. And I also want to talk about what Los Angeles Times talked about this executive order, and I'll just quote them quickly. President Biden's administration pledged early executive actions to swiftly undo many of his predecessors' policies to remake the U.S. immigration system. But in Biden's first weeks in office, officials have found themselves pleading for patience, saying they're constrained by President Trump's tango of executive orders and administrative restrictions on immigration, as well as by public health concerns amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Then they go on to say, on Tuesday, Biden will sign a series of executive orders and directives on immigration that primarily mandate the review of, rather than to end Trump policies that the new administration has said to get rid of, according to Biden officials who reviewed the action. So based on what they were saying here, that is more, they haven't outright banned a lot of Trump's immigration policies, merely reviewing them. So I think we'll have to wait and see how far they go in addressing Trump's immigration policies. And then last one that we'll go into more detail, sorry about this. Executive order refocusing on the climate crisis and canceling the Keystone XL permit.
Oh, yeah.
So this is also a good executive order, but it's also another one that was pretty symbolic move. For those who don't know, I'll give a bit of background on the Keystone XL pipeline. It's an oil pipeline system in Canada and the United States, which starts in Alberta, Canada, to Steel City, Nebraska. There's a lot of backlash for this oil pipeline due to a lot of the risk of spillage and also from the act of fracking itself, which is very environmentally damaging, and also a high risk of spillage and more environmental disaster. And also the transportation also leads into issues around breaking treaties on indigenous land, for example. So there's whole issues around that. So I mean, it is good that he canceled the Keystone XL permit, but next to that, he also authorized 31 new drilling permits to extract oil. As Bloomberg states, offshore, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement has issued 22 drilling permits to 8 companies since January 20th. when Joe Biden was inaugurated. This included BP, Irina Offshore, Shell, etc. And then onshore, the Bureau of Land Management issued 9 permits for wells in Montana, New Mexico, and Wyoming on January 20th and January 21st. And companies like Jonah Energy, Burlington Resources Oil have received these permits. So yeah, as I said, it is a largely symbolic move about Keystone because that's such a high-profile case, and yeah, it just shows that there's a lot of his rhetoric doesn't match up to what actually is done. But yeah, hopefully we do see some transition to more green economy because he did place more emphasis than I originally thought during his campaign about a green transition. So hopefully he stick to his word. But I'm pretty skeptical on that, and especially also his rhetoric around science. Like we're an administration who believes in science, but evidence and science has pointed to the dangers of these oil drilling practices and environmental damage. So hopefully, yeah, as I said, hopefully he sticks to his rhetoric on that. Are there any particular executive orders that you wanted to look at?
Rachel, do you want to start, or
yeah,
should I?
I think just really quickly in terms of that Ted Cruz tweet, like obviously it's such a stupid tweet because like global warming and kind of these issues of the environment just affect everyone and not equally. There's people that don't live in the US that have been far more affected by the kind of like adverse impacts already. But I think in terms of the Paris-Pittsburgh kind of pithy line, that was peddled by Trump when he left the Paris Climate Accord, if I remember correctly. So, and I think he said at the time it showed that he cared more about the people of Pittsburgh than Paris. So I don't know if just in terms of the tweet, maybe it's kind of bringing that back up rather than just like a random one, although it was pretty random at the time. Yeah, just to kind of echo what you've said there, Samuel, in terms of all of those executive orders, I think especially the like trans-military ban is just such a necessary thing to have reversed, and it's crazy that it was even in place in the first place in the 21st century in what's meant to be like the birthplace of kind of liberal democracy and progressive values. So personally speaking, I just think that it was brilliant to see so quickly that it was overturned. And yeah, just to echo what you've said there, really.
Yeah, I'll quickly just add. Well, first of all, I don't think we're gonna have time to go into GameStop, but to be fair, that's not really that important. But what I'll say about what I'm happy about is the private prisons ending. Like obviously, this is a good step in the right direction. The fact that it doesn't involve some of the ICE facilities obviously shows that there's more work to be done. But at the end of the day, I guess you have to start somewhere. And so I'm just happy that these initial steps have been taken. Trans-military ban, obviously a great thing. I was obviously good that it got reversed, not that it was a good thing in the first place. And then yeah, I mean, just more generally though, I'd say about the administration, I feel like so I think they're going a lot on the optics of what's happening here instead of actually like substantive policy, as Samuel alluded to over there. If they actually believed in science, why are they fracking? Why is Joe Biden so hesitant to not ban fracking and all that kind of stuff, right? So so it's good steps in the right direction. Personally, doesn't go enough for me. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of what we would expect for a Biden presidency, which was this kind of moderate way of going about things in the U.S. So it's not really too different from what I know we've discussed before and what is really expected of him. One quick failure I will point out about him is with regards to the stimulus checks. He said that those stimulus checks should be going out immediately and that there would be $2,000, even in the Georgia primary. And he's backtracked on that and made it $1,400 and said they're going to be issued in March, which is just not great. Just not good. And people need these checks now. They've been waiting for so long, and they've gotten such little financial support when compared to like European countries. It's unreal. But with that being said, though, if we had a Trump administration in right now, the idea that we'd have another stimulus check is definitely would not even be discussed, because obviously you'd have potentially a majority in the Senate, for example, and even if they didn't, Trump could veto the order, right? So yeah. Just good to point that out, I think.
Yeah, exactly. No, not much else to say from that. Yeah, I think it is what we expected from Biden. Obviously, it's very early in into his administration. So we can't really say to what how these executive orders will be further developed and how he will further address more systematic issues. But I am very doubtful about that. Yeah, and I'm also interested. I mean, I didn't go any over any executive orders regarding foreign policy, but I am interested to see developments in that because I think his first few days in administration, he brought more troops back into Syria, which is interesting. And obviously, that's a very complex situation because obviously, I think U.S. military aggression is not something that we want. But in Syria, like there is regional conflicts, for example, with like the Kurds, for example. Like you can make a case that besides, Biden, sorry, that's my Siri went on for a minute. You can make the case that the Kurds, for example, who the U.S. allies are in a very difficult situation, as Syria and Turkey are, against them. So you could make the case that bringing the U.S. support for them could protect them, but on the other hand, you don't want to stoke up more tensions, militarily speaking, in Syria. So I mean that is a nuance. Also regards to he's not going to. sorry guys, this my series going on and off. But yeah, and then you also we have to see how it further develops in other parts in the Middle East. Let's see if he takes more troops out. There was discussions to bring even more troops in the Middle East. So I don't know. It's very unsure right now in regards to foreign policy, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
There was also an attack, I think, on was it a U.S. embassy? I think like a U.S. like establishment in Syria, I think, was also recently attacked, and I think that's also another reason why they employed more troops over there.
Sure.
But I will just quickly. I mean, I also hope that the U.S. Re-enters the Iran deal, which was probably one of Obama's biggest foreign policy achievements. During his time in office. But yeah, Rachel, do you have anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so particularly. Just it will be interesting after these kind of like initial ones to see where it goes, especially as you were saying in terms of that kind of foreign policy. Although the domestic agenda has to be first and foremost, it will be interesting to see what direction he takes then.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly one quick thing about the Iran deal. I saw recently that Anthony Blinken, who's Secretary of State, he was talking about how he was preoccupied about the idea that Iran's on the brink of developing a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of issues around that. But firstly, I want to say I think Iran, as a country, they have the right to defend themselves, especially now because they've seen over the past 4 years a lot of aggression from the U.S. and its allies towards them. So I mean, I don't blame them for trying to protect themselves because we've seen countries in the past who've agreed to denuclearize and they've ended up getting invaded. So from that point of view, I understand it. But there is one way to solve this, it's to rejoin the Iran deal, which we set up, So hopefully we make an effort to re-enter the Iran deal because it was a good deal in the first place, and as we said, one of Obama's best legacies and actions that he took. So hopefully that's addressed and we've salvaged that relationship with Iran, because if not, then it could lead to a lot more disaster, globally speaking. So
yeah, definitely. Okay, yeah, well, I guess with that, a little bit of a short and sweet episode, but we're all quite busy over here, so just had to, get the podcast in when we could.
I think we could maybe go, cause I think it'd be interesting to go over GameStop. So maybe next episode, or maybe even a loose one. It's like a few minute talk one just about GameStop.
Yeah,
definitely.
Fallout, like as it keeps progressing.
Yeah, exactly. It is definitely an interesting case study. So we will cover that. Just didn't have time to get to it today. But anyway, as always, like, subscribe, share our videos. It helps us grow. With regards to Twitter, Instagram, you can find us on Instagram at Systems Reimagined, on Twitter at Sys Reimagined. Just again, thank you, Samuel, Rachel. We'll see you all very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.